discuss our museum, what's going on behind the scenes, our local history, or community, its history and culture, past and present. Today, the three of us, your dedicated hosts, are excited to explore a topic that resonates deeply with all of us: memories and personal attachments. In this episode, we will discuss why memories are important and what personal attachments truly mean. We will explore what memories are, the difference between good and bad memories, and whether the bad ones should be passed on. Along the way, we will delve into how emotional attachments to objects are formed and the ways we can keep our memories alive. Join us as we share stories passed down through generations and consider the stories we might pass on to future generations.
She did it again.
Well, why don't we just kick it off and talk about why stories are important?
I think stories are important that's how we engage through others, through stories and storytelling. And with storytelling, it's a lot more than just reinstation of facts and events as human beings. We are automatically drawn to stories because we reflect ourselves in them. Every culture has stories to tell. These stories form the basis of how we think about the world and our lives. Stories preserve culture and pass on cultural knowledge from one generation to another. In essence, stories keep cultures alive. Stories provide a timeless link to ancient traditions, legends, myths, to universal truths about ourselves and our world. Through stories, we share passions, fears, sadness, hardships, and joys, and we find common ground with other people that we can connect and communicate with them.
Stories help us connect with others by sharing experiences, emotions, and perspectives that help preserve history and heritage and keeping the past alive, and allowing future generations to learn about their roots and culture. Stories are useful tools for teaching and learning. They make complex ideas more relatable. When hearing other people's stories, we develop empathy and compassion. We will learn to see the world from a variety of viewpoints, as well as appreciate the diversity of human experiences.
Wow. Those were good. I think, really touching on, they're a great way of sharing what someone has learned.
Yeah.
And a great way of passing that on. I mean, if you think about it, oral histories, which, the indigenous cultures are very big into passing down things through oral history, and there's a reason for that, because it's just such a great way to pass on things that you've learned, lessons that someone has learned before you, so you don't have to repeat the same mistakes. Oftentimes, we still sometimes do.
Most of the time.
Because there's no better way of learning than experiencing. But they're there also when you do mess up and follow in that. It's my dad, sorry dad, I don't know. But my dad might have made that mistake, and this is how he dealt with the consequences or how he overcame this challenge or something. And so you can learn from that even after the fact that you've done I did this, so learn from my mistakes type of moment.
100%.
Got a lot of those for my kids.
I don't have any kids, but when I do.
Well, I mean, even for, kids in the classroom,
Oh,
though,
yeah.
I mean, some stories you might not want to share because they're just a little too personal, but,
Yeah.
There's other ones of, guys, when I was that age, I did this, and maybe don't do that.
Yeah. Well, as of, the end of the school year, they thought I lived at the school, and, one of them I was talking, I was like, oh, my mom, and one of them said, you have a mom? And I'm like, where do you think I came from? And they're like, oh. I'm like, yeah, I don't just come from the teacher store. That's just, they don't just have a back room full of teachers. It's just I want that one.
You just spawn in our classroom
Yeah.
at the beginning of the day. That's how that works.
Anyway, back on topic. But
yeah, they're also just a great way of preserving history. We here at the museum are really working hard on collecting those oral histories. We had the Bat Busters in, which was a female baseball team that actually went to provincials and did quite well. And they just came in and they just shared their stories. So I may mention them a couple times throughout this podcast because that was just really cool just to, I didn't even know that they existed. Sorry, guys. Because they were before my time. I didn't even know they were a thing before this weekend, pretty much.
Well, now we have an artifact in our museum that represents them, which is really, really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's also, a great way of, that artifact represents that story that's going to be told. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. Because what they were sharing with us were their memories.
Yeah.
So, what are memories?
To me, again, I'm sorry, I wrote a little bit of an essay.
Go ahead.
Human memory involves the ability to both preserve and recover information. However, it's not always a perfect process. Like, sometimes things are forgotten or misremembered compared to others. So, like, the way, like, I go back to, like, the worldview type, the sense that I say to my kids, like, something that happened to someone else or someone that said to someone else, everyone interacts with something differently. So, like, your memory isn't always obviously correct. Unfortunately, memories don't always last, so we tend to forget a great deal of the things that we learn. Some memories are brief, some are just seconds long. So memories allow people to take that information in the world and keep it stored. So, like I said, we learn from our mistakes. So we have a memory of the time that we did something, and it may not have went good, or it may have went good, and we keep that and we can pass that on. But then we have to kind of remember that memories aren't always forever, so that's why it's important to kind of pass those on.
Yeah. What do you have for what our memories do?
Mine was technical and a little long.
That's okay.
Okay. So memories either are the psychological process of acquiring, storing, and retrieving all sorts of information. Memories play a crucial role in shaping who we are, allowing us to function in our daily lives, form relationships, and remember important events. There are short-term memories lasting only seconds or minutes, and long-term memories lasting anywhere from days to a lifetime. According to Psychology Today, memory is a continually unfolding process. Initial details of an experience take shape in memory. The brain's representation of that information then changes over time. With subsequent reactivations, the memory grows stronger or fainter and takes on different characteristics. Memories reflect real-world experience, but with varying levels of fidelity and to that original experience. The degree to which the memories we form are accurate or easily recalled depends on a variety of factors, from the psychological conditions in which information is first translated into memory, to the manner in which we seek or are unwittingly promoted to conjure details from the past.
No, that was good, and thanks for bringing more of like a technical aspect to it, because I think like the brain is so complex, like to even understand why some memories last and some don't.
Yeah. Okay.
But Psychology Today, actually, the site I grabbed, they said something, and I'm just gonna read it out. It says, a person's memory is a sea of images and other sensory impressions, facts and meanings, echoes of past feelings, and ingrained codes of how to behave, and it's just a diverse well of information. And I really liked that kind of definition of like a person's memory, because sometimes like I remember something so vividly.
Oh, yeah.
But other times my memory is more just I went to this and this invoked a feeling of joy or something. And that's all I really remember. And so like that's kind of why I really like that definition, because of the way that it's not like just like how Inside Out has it with like scenes playing by.
I really like that you brought up Inside Out, because it really is kind of how it works. Like, emotions in her head are controlling her memories. So like when you said, when you think of a memory, it's the emotion that you felt. And that's kind of cool that you brought that out, because I'm a Disney nerd. So that's wonderful. To all my students, that one's for you.
Is there anything else you have to add, or any thoughts on what memories are, or what we said?
Yeah, I think they're more drawn to a memory is kind of represented by the emotion when you felt with it. Like emotion, like some of them are of certain people. You have a connection with them, or that memory is based around that. They're like kind of categorized.
Yeah.
The little sections.
Yeah.
All right, and with that, are there good and bad memories? And specifically, should the bad be passed on?
I think there are definitely good memories, and of course there's always bad memories. I mean, there's always the traumas that some people suffer. But I think, like, you know, you can't just not discuss the bad ones.
Yeah.
Of course you want to discuss the good ones, and those should definitely be shared. But you can't just discuss the bad ones. I mean, okay, I feel like I've used this as an example before, but like if you think about like the Holocaust, that is a horrible a horrible time,
Mhm.
right? But I mean, I think it's important we discuss and talk about it and teach it to kids because if we don't talk about it, I mean, history, they say, repeats itself.
Yeah.
So if we don't teach them, hey, that's not okay,
Yeah.
then we're going to, you know, repeat that.
Yeah.
Also, like, even just within families,
Yeah.
there's certain things that maybe don't need to be aired out on a podcast,
Yeah.
but like definitely within the family, those things should be discussed.
Yeah, I have more definitions.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. So, or kind of definition, technical like. Yes, memories are categorized as good or bad based on the emotion or experience we associate with them with. Good memories are commonly linked to positive experiences or emotions such as happiness, love, and satisfaction. On the other hand, bad memories are usually linked to negative experiences and emotions such as fear, sadness, or trauma. And then, in my opinion, it is up to you on whether you pass on your bad memories or not. It's important to consider those memories' ability to help others learn from them or avoid something similar happening to them in the future. Sharing the memories can foster empathy and understanding. It strengthens relationships and community bonds. And reliving the memories could be distressing for you, both you and the person listening, which is kind of a common reason people don't share their bad memories and whatnot. It could trigger some other people's trauma, so it's important to consider the timing and the audience. That is key. And for history this year, back to the Holocaust stuff, my class and I read stories of Holocaust survivors from the web and whatnot that our teacher found. And those stories help to educate us, future generations, and allow us to feel empathy and compassion for those people despite never knowing them or living. Like, that's past to us. Maybe not to our parents or grandparents because they were kind of around in that time a little bit, but for us it's the past. We don't really get a connection with that quite often.
Yeah.
So for us, it really helps us understand what those people went through and the horrors that they experienced and learn from the past. It's not the last genocidal thing that's happened in history.
Right.
There's been recent stuff throughout after that as well.
Yeah. No. Thank you for acknowledging like a lot of stuff in there of like the traumas that some people will go through and also that there's been more since the Holocaust. Because yeah, that's important to like acknowledge and understand. Yeah, those are tough things to talk about. It's not as easy as, well, that one wasn't so great. Well, we're just going to talk about it anyways.
Yeah.
But there's another thing you said in there of like it's your choice, but also like know that helps with like the learning. Like memories are so important because they're kind of the keepers of knowledge. They're the keepers of experience where you've learned something. And they're also the keepers of history. Because if those memories of the Holocaust, if no one passed those down, like we might not even learn about it in school.
Oh, even with what we've passed down, we can only grasp a little bit of what it was like.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you want to learn a little bit more about D-Day, we do have a YouTube video out about it. Sorry.
Plug.
Okay.
So with that being like good and bad memories, some people might have like personal attachments to some of those things. So why don't we talk about what are personal attachments?
Well, technically, personal attachments refer to the emotional bonds or connections we form with people, objects, stories, and memories. Such attachments help shape our identity. Most attachments are formed with stuff of sentimental value, memories, and culture or social connections. They're connected in some way to who we are, what we are, who we know.
I had something similar. I said when personal attachment is when you're emotionally attached to a story or item or even a person. It's when you relate or connect to something that provided joy, comfort, or sometimes even sadness.
Yeah, and then just like going back for like the sentiment that Tay mentioned, that's like just a strong feeling, again, repeating like the tenderness and the sadness, but also nostalgia. So for us, like, how might those personal attachments, how might those happen, or why do we have personal attachments to objects?
Like, I think they could happen really at any point in time or like happen over time. Like, I know for me personally, just gonna air this out on a podcast, like I have a personal emotional attachment to my old baby blanket. Like, it's something that it's like, oh yeah, I could get rid of it, but like the thought of getting rid of it, it like hits somewhere emotionally that it was just like, oh, that would be gone forever.
Mm-hmm.
So even though like I don't need it, it's just like the emotional attachment of it
Right.
that I can't.
Yeah.
Or like my emotional attachment to the stories about my grandfather. Like it's those, I'm attached to those stories.
Right.
Even though I'm not directly correlated to those, it was his life.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the stories that I hang on to and I'm emotionally attached to,
Right.
so to speak.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Tay?
More technical again. Emotional attachments with objects are formed because the objects in question often trigger specific memories, have had emotions associated with a person or event transferred to it, or I lost my place. It provides a sense of comfort or security. It could be a form of self-expression, reflecting your personal identity, values, and tastes, or it could even be from a significant event in your life, such as a wedding or a souvenir from travels.
Right, and I really liked that transfer. It's like that emotional memory you have, which transfers over and you kind of attach it to that personal object.
Yeah.
Hence how we get this personal
Yeah.
attachment. And I just kind of found that there are kind of 4 areas in which we kind of create personal attachments. So one is recollection. So that's where memories are triggered for something. Or they help us relive our personal history. So like sometimes that could be like a family photo or something.
Yeah.
Then there's self-expression. So those are like very an extension of our identity, and just kind of reflecting like who we are. So I know like for some people, if we think about like our religious section of our churches, like some people have like for the Catholics, you know, like the different saints, they have statues of them, or even just a statue of Jesus. Like those are something that someone might have had a personal attachment to that because that reflected their values and their beliefs. The comfort one, which you kind of mentioned with like your blanket, like they talk a lot about like security blankets, which is like what most kids have when they're younger. Like it becomes a security blanket. I can relate because I had a baby blanket that I was like, I'm very attached to, and I think it just like when I was scared, that's what I would run and grab if my mom and dad weren't around. Like that was like my comfort thing. And then social and cultural influences. Yeah. So like traditional things, like I'm very attached to Christmas trees. I like Christmas a lot, so
I like Christmas. And I like Halloween.
See, that one I'm not quite as attached to. I'm very like Christmas, like if I decked out my dorm room. Like I have my own ornaments.
See, we always had big Christmases, but like when I think of Halloween, I think of me and my cousins all dressing up and going around as like a family.
Yeah.
And it was like the most favorite thing with all of us. And I think it's just like I have an emotional attachment. Right.
Yeah.
You have an emotional attachment
to Christmas.
Christmas. We got it. We hit the hill on the net.
Is there a specific holiday you're like, woo?
I kind of don't feel too much for holidays, but Christmas and Halloween are pretty tied. Specifically, Christmas trees with the white lights, not the colored ones. Because they remind me of the candles that they used to use. I prefer, generally, I will not allow my siblings to stick up the colored blue ones because I hate it.
Just blue? Not
or
multi?
Like they're multi, but like the blue, it just stands out. I was like, no, I like the white better.
I will
it reminds
say
me
I'm
of the
partial
candles.
to the white as well.
Yeah.
See, I don't care as long as it's lit up.
As long as it's sparkly.
As long as it's bright. And
Marianne
colorful in
Brown.
other ways. But I do have a little bit of a soft spot for the colored ones. So that's just probably because that's what we use at home.
Yeah. Well, we used to use color.
Well, I think it all depends what you grew up with.
Yeah.
We used to use the colored ones a lot, and then we found the white ones. I unearthed them once out of the basement. And we've been using them ever since.
I love the word unearthed.
I like them just because of their historical connection with how the trees used to be, with just candles, not electricity or
Which, like,
fancy
isn't that a
colored
fire
stuff.
hazard for candles and trees?
But not saying it wasn't a thing.
Don't you know? Like, that's why, like, most houses burned down back in the day. It was because, like, Christmas trees, like, fell over and caught on fire.
Christmas was not a happy time for
No.
most people.
Anyway.
So how do you recognize if you have that attachment to these objects or even events?
I think it's, like, a gut feeling. Like, I know like if I look at something and I like imagine my life without it and I
Mhm.
kind of feel it in your gut,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Like if you'll know if you're not ready to get rid of something, at least in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
But if you like pick something up, you're like, I really do not care whatever happens to this, then sure, whatever.
Yeah.
But I feel like you'll know if you have an attachment to something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you think, Tay?
A little more technical again. I found, where'd my little line go? Oh yeah. You likely have an emotional attachment to an object if you feel strong emotions when you see or think of said object, frequently use or display it, have difficulty letting it go, if it triggers memories or reminds you of certain people, places, or events. If you have personalized it in some way, such as giving it a name or human-like qualities. Like, I don't know if you name a bear or something. Probably got a
Don't
personal
at
attachment
me.
to it. Figured you'd be the most likely.
Leave Conrad out of this,
I
Tadine.
didn't know his name was Conrad.
You didn't name your teddy bears when you were younger?
No, not really. Not unless, like, I have one that symbolizes a dog of mine that died. Sure, it looks like him, so I named it him.
Wow, I'm
I'm
I
offended.
named a lot of my stuffed
I
animals. There's a lot that I didn't. I definitely agree with that. Because really all I put for this was simply the thought of throwing it away evokes such an emotion.
Yeah.
Like sadness or like even like almost like the gut feeling. Like makes you sick. The
Yeah.
thought of it going in the trash or like being in the hands of someone else.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how
If
you
I
know.
can't have it, no one can.
Now we all have very healthy attachments.
Could be some unhealthy attachments.
Well, and I mean, like, I was kind of reading a little bit because, like, it was really hard to. This podcast was probably the hardest one for research wise for me, because a lot of it was talking about relationships instead of objects, and it's like, are you emotionally attached to this person? And I'm like, not what I'm trying to research here. My bosses are gonna be going to search things up and be like, what was Catherine doing? But I did kind of see, like, there was one site that was really good, but it was like a wellness site.
Yeah.
And so it was talking about, like, do you have an unhealthy?
Mhm.
So, like, if it really rules your life, that's when it's the point. If you're at home wondering, that's when it's the point that it's really unhealthy. But it's not unhealthy to have personal attachments to objects as long as it's not, like, controlling your life. So how do we keep those memories alive? That
I simply think, like, tell them, write them down, record yourself telling them. I think that's the best way. Like, even our local historian that comes in, like, just by doing that and recording that, that's keeping those memories and that history alive. So I think that's the most simplest way to do that.
Right. And if you need to come in and tell the museum and record it with us, we'd be more than happy to have you to come in and we'll record it so that we here at the museum can keep that history alive. Another plug. Sorry, but
Thank you very much in advance.
Yeah. You know, and can use it for research purposes for us. It would help a lot.
Right. Yeah, and of course, like, always, like, now we always have phones, and, like, we whip them out, and sometimes there are, like, moments where it's like, okay, put the phone away.
Yeah.
But they're a great way to keep, like, the Snapchat memories that are always, like, 2 years ago or a year ago. Like, it's funny to look back at those and be like, oh my goodness, that's what I was doing, like, last year.
Or like this
2
day
years.
2 years ago. I got one the other day, and it was like during the COVID year, and I had just gotten my vaccination, and I was like, ooh.
Okay. We keep memories alive by creating albums or scrapbooks, writing journals or memory books, record videos or audio messages, create digital archives, share stories, engage in activities that remind you of people or events, celebrate anniversaries and milestones, create digital memory books, timelines, and family trees.
I really liked the events part of it because, I mean, couples, of course, celebrate their anniversaries or whatever, but the cool ones are, those are very cool. As my parents just celebrated their wedding anniversary, but those are cool. But the cool ones are the reunions.
Yeah.
The reunions are really cool, especially when you haven't seen everyone. So when the Batbusters had the reunion the past weekend when we're recording this, and and it was really cool because a couple of them came in to see some of the artifacts that we did have about them, and then they recorded and did a story for us, like the oral history, so that we can preserve some of that history. But it was just really cool to hear them just kind of share their stories, and as they were just chatting back and forth and catching up, and also like relive those memories, and just it was very special that like I'm just feel so grateful that I got to witness some of that like emotion that they had and those memories that they were reliving. I wasn't there, but it was still just such a special moment. And like just the way that they just talk about that time in their life was just, it was so like not me almost wanting to tear up now. Like I can't even describe it because I was like almost tearing up in the moment just as the way they were talking about it, and the way that they were just so grateful for the support that they had from the community and their parents and their coaches and other players. It was so sweet. And because of this reunion, even here at the museum, we were able to preserve more. But also, they get to, I remember one of the stories, they were like, well, where was I when that happened? Like, I didn't know that. And so it's just to see that and preserve that little bits of information was really cool. And if you're listening, Fat Busters, thank you so much for allowing me to be just a little bit part of that. So yeah.
All right. So, well, you kind of just said how that kind of made a difference, but what is one story that was passed down to you that made a difference?
The story that is probably the most vivid in my memory is one that a teacher shared with my class, but it is not my story to tell.
That's fair. That's fair. Sometimes those stories, like the ones that you can't share, those ones have lasting impacts. Like, I know when I was like researching this, I was like, of course I have stories. People have told me stories, but the ones that were flipping through my head, of course, when you want the other ones, were the ones of what not to do stories. And so, but those have value. Of course, I'm not going to air out those people's what not to do stories, but those ones have like value. And of course, I kind of talked about it earlier, so I won't go too much into it again. But also just learning from like your grandparents of like where you came from, and even your parents, and you know, kind of what brought them to a point of that. Now this is a value that we have as our family, have been something. But also, you said that maybe family members haven't passed it on. I mean, there's so much with social media, even with people sharing their stories or testimonies, and even just movies based off of true stories. Now I know they're slightly dramatized, but like they still bring up a good discussion.
Hachi. I have no clue what that is.
It's about a dog.
That movie hit me to my core. I still to this day, or Marley and Me. Oh, I'm tearing up just thinking about it.
Never watched
sorry.
any of them.
Okay, sorry, keep going.
No, that's okay. But I mean, those movies, like, they really get you to stop and think about things and reflect. And a lot of those two movies' themes is friendship. And so that was, I think, for me, that's what I was gonna say.
Not me, I'm literally crying over here.
I'll keep talking for a little bit then, give you a minute to compose yourself.
Yeah.
But also, I think, like, for me, the best stories that help me learn are those of my own experiences, and I'm sure that's for everyone too. And like, I don't know if my story or my stories are even gonna impact anyone or have that, but I'm not gonna keep it to myself. Like, I will, if someone asks me what's my story, I'll tell them, because maybe that will have a profound impact that makes them want to cry. Or something, like, it'll just inspire them, maybe. No, my story's not that inspirational, but like, you know, like, everyone has something. Everyone has learned a lesson. Everyone has a story, and if you think you don't, think again. That's probably the nicest way I can put it, because everyone has learned something. If you haven't learned something, probably doing it wrong then. And I guarantee you, though, that you have learned something.
I think in terms of mine, like, I have learned so much in my life just from where who my family is. I think the thing that stands out to me most was my late grandpa was like the kindest soul you've ever met. Like the gentlest, most amazing man I've ever met in my life. He always treated everyone with respect. He always said, "No one is a stranger, it's just a friend you have not met yet." That, hearing that growing up, stuck with me, and I think it kind of formed who I am. Like, the treat everyone as if they were family or a friend, because you never know who they will be to you going forward, which I think is what formed me, and I tell that to my students. Like, that's the thing I say at the beginning of the year. You might not know everyone in the class, but treat everyone as if they were your best friend, because one day they might be.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
And I'm not going to get emotional, but yeah.
Yeah. No, and that's a great example of stories that have been passed down. So what stories would maybe you guys pass down, or like even like for those at home and they think that they don't have a story worth passing down, like what types of stories would you think be worth passing down?
Like, I would personally pass down stories of like my education growing up and how I was treated in school. I wasn't treated the best in school, and I had a lot of stuff that went down that formed me to who I am today. So I think I would pass that down and just kind of say, like, you don't have to change who you are to fit the expectation of those around you. And I think that's a big thing even now with social media, with kids seeing these models, influencers looking a certain way or having certain things, that they feel they have to change themselves to fit this expectation that society puts on kids, and just stress that, like, that was around even when we were kids, right? It was just like a different scenario because we didn't really have the big social media thing. It was the kids themselves put that pressure on you. So just like, know, like, though we went through it in a different way, we went through it and it was the same. Don't make the same mistakes that I did, or if you do, know that you're not alone going through it, because if you're going through it, chances are 100 other people are feeling the same way that you are.
Yeah.
I'm sure I could come up with quite a few for why not to do dumb stunts, and or potentially dangerous things, or just memories from hanging out with friends that I know. But going off some of the stuff Brooklyn said, yeah, my best friend now, we did not get along back when she first came to school at all, and now we're best friends. So you don't ever know, and it's best to always treat everyone as if they could potentially, because they probably will be. It's likely. As you grow up, you change. Everyone changes.
Yeah. Especially in a small town.
Yeah.
You got limited selection.
Yeah. And the social media stuff, like the influence, you can see it. If you look down at the, like, younger kids, you're like, oh yeah. You can physically see that how much social medias have an influence on them and the way they talked. It's such, like, a big thing now to be like everyone on social media. And, like, do you have to be? No.
When I feel like adults even fall to it too.
Yeah.
Like, even sometimes I catch myself, like, I scroll and, like, I follow other teachers and I'm like, why am I not like this teacher? Or why don't I have a classroom like this? This teacher seems like they have it all together. But then you have to remember, what people post on the internet isn't always the reality. And, like, what is that person going through behind the scenes? Right?
Yeah. And I just pretty much wrote down examples of what, like, couples could share how they first met, because that dating scene has changed quite a bit. Or even, like, athletes sharing their greatest accomplishment. I know for me as an athlete, I ended up going to provincials for curling, but my greatest accomplishment is actually our sportsmanship award that we won. There is a banner hanging in the school, and that was, like, that for me was not even the fact that we made it to provincials, although that is really cool, but just the fact that we were a team that, because that's voted on by other teams and like officials and stuff, the fact that other teams were like, those guys were great, just human beings to play against. That means a lot more to me than if we would have won the provincials trophy.
That speaks more volumes of who you are as a person than, like, to me, like, knock on wood, I die. I want to be known as a good person rather than the person that won or was successful at everything.
Mm-hmm. And I think even for the everyday people, I guess, like if you weren't into sports or like you don't have an art gallery or something, like you still have a story. Yeah. It's the simple things that highlight your culture, your lifestyle, your struggles, and your triumphs. Like, if you think about it, like we have chamber pots, and that's a story in its own. And that sounds like back then, if we would tell those guys we have chamber pots in our museum, they would be like, why? Why would you do that? I mean, who knows? Probably not, but like, we might just have a whole bunch of toilets sitting in our museum at one point in time.
Yeah.
But like, why? Why is that? Because life has changed. And,
yeah.
And so telling even the simple everyday stories, like life has changed so much and it's continuing to change so much with technology and just the way that we even live our lives. Mm-hmm. And so the simple things sound so stupid to tell stories of, but yet 20 years, 50 years, down the line, 100 years down the line, like they are going to be insane. So special and so significant and understanding.
In 20 years, we could be living like Marty McFly.
I have no clue who that is.
In Back to the Future. Technically, he's already lied to us because we're supposed to be living that way now. But which, in some ways, we are. I think he just fudged it a little bit. Like, he just over-exaggerated.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you can see differences now. Like, when I grew up, I didn't watch TV. We had movies, a lot of Westerns. But the kids on the bus, they had DSs and stuff. Old technology now compared to the kids in all their iPhones. There's a difference that's a 7-year age gap.
I was going to say, we were playing with Barbie and Polly Pockets. So I don't know what this generation was doing.
Barbies weren't a thing for me, so.
Yeah, that was...
Just for reference, me and Catherine are very much older than T. So
7 years, like...
But
roughly.
Barbies are still a thing.
Okay, but like 7 years, I know it sounds small, and it is compared to like what our parents were playing with. But if you think about it, like we grew up with Hannah Montana. My little cousins now, like they know that Hannah Montana is Miley Cyrus, but like that wasn't as influential and significant in their childhood as it was for us.
We grew up with Miley Cyrus, Space, Hannah Montana. So when we found out that they were the same person, our worlds were blown. Yeah. Like, it was, like, and I know, like she said, it's 7 years. Yeah. But, like, even when we talked to you, even off the podcast, about us growing up, you're like, what's that? And we're just like, how? But
was it Polly Pockets?
Maybe it was Polly Pockets.
Yeah. I'd just like to end this by encouraging everyone at home. Like, if you feel like you don't have a story, you do. And here at the museum, we'd really like to help collect those stories and pass it on and preserve it for the next generation. So whether you want to come in and record history, especially if you're up there in the generations and you want to come in and just share what it was like to live when you were a child or in your 20s, like our age here, like we would love for you to come in and share that information with us. If you have a connection to any of our artifacts, we'd love to hear about it. And also, we're working on producing 100 Stories of Whitewood book, and we want to publish it, and we need to collect those stories. So if you have something, please write it. And like I said, everyone has something, whether it be simple and small, or whether it be very elaborate. And it doesn't need to be elaborate. We can put little snippets in. We're the ones publishing it. We get to choose what it looks like. So I just really encourage you to come into the museum and just share your stories and help us preserve it. And if you don't, please, please, please at home, pass on that history that you have. Share that knowledge with your children, your grandchildren, just with your family and friends.
Yeah. And with that, the word of the day will be family. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Bye. See you guys next time.
Yeah, bye.